What do you guys want to talk about today? Let's make it fun. It's like our Friday. Not really, but
Why is fear paralyzed?
hello. There was a woman who used to come to the car wash many years ago. She was a librarian at Roosevelt, where we used to wash cars. And she stopped coming to the car wash. And once in a while, I'd wonder about her. She was a little older, in her 60s perhaps. And she had said one day she was driving on the highway and she got hit. And she couldn't leave her house for about 2 years. And she couldn't drive for all that time. You know, a lot of it really depends on the intensity of the experience, the sort of narrative or story or trauma that it creates inside you, where exactly you are in life, you know, your age. So many things factor in. It's, you know, if you went into a relationship, say a marriage, with a good amount of hope, and little by little, as Albert Camus would say, you know, life has only one purpose, really, to destroy, to crush all of human hope and dreams and aspirations. When things fizzle out and the two of you go your own separate ways, you go through your bouts of loneliness and depression and anger and those things, and after a while, hopefully, those emotions will dissipate a little. And then you say, well, this kind of lifestyle sucks. I want to go out there and find a companion. But there is so much fear inside you. You're a little older now. You see things a bit better. We have a poet by the name of Hafiz. Hafiz has this beautiful saying that the biggest sin that you will ever have in your life is your ability to see clearly. Because it's a burden you have to carry. You know, when you're 18 and you've never been in a relationship, all you have is hope and dreams. It's beautiful, you know. But the moment you're touched by life and certain things about you have been broken, every time you walk very close to the thing you desire, the experience keeps popping its head saying, remember, be cautious. And I don't think there can be a greater sin than that. And so fear, in some ways, has really its roots in experience. And depending on what exactly it is that you've experienced, then it could be traumatizing. Why it leads to paralysis, good luck, I don't know. So, yeah. Yes, Dagan?
I wasn't asking questions.
You have nice hair. Do you wash it every day? I don't mean to, I'm just tired. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, how do you deal with
We don't. When you're young, it's a different story because, I mean, look, let's say you live in a one-story house, okay? And they poured the slab, it's about 4 inches thick, and time changes, changes things, you have a family now, and you want a second story. And you decide to remove the roof from the garage and build a top floor on that. The truth is the 4-inch slab is not going to handle the weight. So what you need to do is someone needs to come there, with a concrete cutter, remove that particular part of the house, and pour a new slab about maybe 6 inches, maybe 8 inches thick. Some changes are foundational and fundamental. Okay? Some changes are superficial. Let's say you call your mom and you say, I won't be home for dinner. Well, that's a change. She made some food, and you're about 12 or 13 or 14. It's your first time outing with your friends. She says, okay, my son is growing up a little. But she knows that you're going to be home. Maybe midnight, maybe 2 in the morning, who the hell knows? That's a very superficial change in her lifestyle. It'll take some adjusting, but nevertheless. And then you turn 18 or 19 or 20, you've had some college units, it's time for you to move. And you apply to various schools, and even though your mom wants the best for you, the idea of you flying across the universe, going to NYU, for example, and she in Roseville, let's say your father, her husband, is there no more, you're the only child that she has, that's a fundamental change for her. And she has to figure out what to do, coming home, not seeing a soul. So it depends what kind of a change we're talking about. If someone has been smoking for the past 15 years and all of a sudden says, I want to change, I no longer want to smoke, you're talking about a fundamental change, which is overcoming like 15, 16, 20 years of habits. Every day at 6 in the morning, waking up and smoking. 10 o'clock smoking, 12 o'clock smoking, smoking after lunch, after dinner, after breakfast, while having sex, while using a toilet. So that's a big change. And there's a good chance that you have cultivated so many addictions, so many habits, so many routines that you're not going to make many, many changes. You may quit for a day or two, but it's going to come back and haunt you again. The other aspect of change really has to do with the fact that ever since we landed on this planet as naked apes that we are, we've only really desired for one thing: security and stability. There's a reason why we develop habits and routine, because it allows access to the future. For the next 14 weeks, whether you like it or not, your future on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 10:15, it's set. You come to class. I mean, that's a wonderful thing. Alexis, hello. Now, if you have come to like this class, not being able to come to this class when the semester is over is going to be a little difficult. But because it doesn't really make the very foundation of your life, you slowly begin to adjust. If, on the other hand, the cause of this class has made you go to the library, read lots of books, change your conversation with your friends, maybe even your lifestyle, then it's going to be a bit more difficult. The point I'm trying to make ultimately is, for the past many, many hundreds of thousands of years, the only thing we really wanted is security. Routine and habits. In as much as you'll go to lots of bookstores and they'll tell you that change is good, habits are bad, routine is bad, be open to possibilities. This is just Western American style looking at life. None of us in this class enjoy change because it's tough. Change means going against the routines you've created for the past 20, 30, 40 years. You may not like the routine and you may desire to change, but that's a different story. So, what was your question? Oh, accept change. That's not, yeah, I don't.
Then how do you change yourself?
Oh, you can. Can you ask your question like 10 minutes? Maybe 5. Once my mood changes a little. What was this question? What was your question?
You deal with and accept change.
Oh, how do you deal with and accept change? Let's say you enjoy thinking and the semester is about to begin. You look at the Laney schedule and you say, philosophy class. It ends somewhere in December. And so you make your schedule. You walk into the classroom, the first moment you look at me, you say, yuck. Well, changing your schedule is not going to be difficult. We haven't yet created a relationship. Instinctually, intuitively, perhaps, you look at me and you say, there is something about this guy I just don't like. Change is not going to be that difficult. So, if on the other hand, you and I did have a relationship, and that relationship was very, very intimate. Let's say you like me, you like the way I present ideas, you come to the office all the time, we sit, we talk, we exchange emails, and you come to class on a Thursday, and my dean is here saying, Amir had a stroke and died. And now you have a new instructor who's going to be doing things very, very differently. That change will be a bit more difficult because of the relationship that we've developed. Okay? So a good amount of how you will accept change and how you will go forward really has to do with the intensity of relationships. The more intimate, the more invested, the more difficult it is. And relationships really vary in degree simply because you and I live in time. Time creates history. History creates stories. Some stories are casual and you're indifferent. Some stories are profoundly intense. So the more intense your relationship, the more difficult it's going to be possible to make some changes and accept. Acceptance is always going to be difficult. Imagine you and I in a relationship. Can you imagine that? Good job. And I'm 60 and you're 20, right? Well, I don't really have very many options out there because first I'm a little older, uglier, smellier, so there are not very many people out there who can potentially be customers. You're the only one. You come to me and say, Amir, I don't think I want to be with you anymore. Well, that's a big change for me, not so much for you. You're young, you know. Your appetite is quite healthy, lots of options out there for you, not for me. So change for me is going to be very difficult. So I'm going to deny, and I'm going to manipulate you into denying the fact that there are certain ways you feel about this relationship, namely because you want to leave. Once I realize I'm not very successful, I'm going to be profoundly angry. You betrayed me, you lied to me, you this, you that. And then I'll text you, call you, show up at your front door, and I say, what if I give you like $10,000? Will you stay with me? I'll use you like a prostitute. And let's say that doesn't work, the bargaining aspect of it. Then I will plunge into depression. It's a big change for me. You're like Peter, my rock. And now that my rock has turned into sand, I have nothing to stand on. And then I overcome depression, hopefully, before my life is over, and then I accept the fact that, yes, there was an age gap, we just were on different paths. Acceptance is at a very, very mature stage in life. Again, depending on the sort of change you're talking about. My kids go to Persian school on Saturdays in Berkeley. One of our friends just lost her husband, had a stroke. They have 3 kids. The middle one, the 17-year-old, had a very good and close relationship to her father. She's devastated. She's angry at her mom. She's angry at herself. She's angry at God. She's angry at life. And that's one of the things about change, especially if the relationship is very close and intimate. Anger, it just overtakes you. And there comes a point, if that ever happens, you just grow tired of being angry all the time. Then you try to make peace, but you need resources, you need tools. And that's sometimes very difficult to find. It takes time. And you have to invest care, interest, to look for tools, to find them, to know how to use them. I'm writing a book on death to leave for my kids. That's a big change. And one of the things I'm currently doing is destroying my relationship with them. Because when I die, they don't really care that much anymore. So there is no need to make drastic changes. That's one of the nice things about the American culture. When you don't have relationships with anyone, there isn't much to do. No change is necessary. You just go on with your life. And when you steal time from people, they can't spend time with anything to create relationships. Yes. Olivia? Oh, I'm sorry. Janai? Janai, right? Yeah. Change yourself from what to what? A caterpillar changes to a butterfly. It's instinctual, organic. Human beings are very, very different. What do you want to change to?
The person you see yourself as.
Which is? There has to be a piece of advertisement out there that inspires you in some shape or form, that makes you feel guilty, ashamed, embarrassed about the person that you are currently. In other words, you go to a gathering, there is Angela Davis sitting and talking. You realize that she's black, you realize she's been around for a while, you realize what she's talking about, how she's talking about the things she's interested, how interested she is about life, certain communities of people. And then naturally you compare yourself to her. Who she is makes you feel just bad about yourself, ashamed about yourself. So the first thing you need to understand, you're not going to want to change from anything to anything if there is nothing out there that makes you feel bad, devalues you a little. So the first thing that happens is comparing and comparisons and contrast. You're comparing yourself to what? To who? You read a book somewhere? You watched a movie somewhere? You know? You had a teacher who told you the African American History Month. What is it? You need to have a piece of information that says you're not enough. You need something more. Is it intuitive, which happens to all of us in this class? You look yourself in the mirror and you say, it hasn't been worth it. I go back to the answer I gave you some weeks ago, perhaps, maybe last week, that find a good piece of advertisement that will make you feel cheap about yourself. I mean, really, really cheap about yourself. And hopefully that'll inspire you to become more than you are. But then you have to look for tools, find the money or resources to buy those tools, read the pamphlet to know how to use those tools, and then hopefully make some changes. Women have a gift that men don't. Your body was designed to create babies. Which means that when you, let's just say, have a child at the age of 18, that kid is going to keep you occupied for the next 10 years. If someone comes to you and says, are you happy? Well, that's a stupid question to ask. I'm responsible for this innocent life. Right? And then you begin to sit and say, I just have one kid. It'd be cruel for this kid to go through life by him or herself. Let me give him a brother or a sister. 5 years later, well, you have another child. That's an additional 10 years of work. But the moment you change the definition to motherhood, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a person in America, then being a mother is no longer enough. You have to be a mother, you have to be a student, you have to be a CEO, you have to be all sorts of things. So as your appetite grows, you become more discontent and unhappy. Yeah, so that dam has cracked. There are no answers. I'm sorry. It may be because I've been here since 4:30 and my brain is fried. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Richard.
Kind of formulate a question right now. How do you think that people ascribe meaning to events? Is that something that's taught to them, how to find meaning in things? Or the reason I bring it up is I think of just multiple moments I've had in my life where I've experienced something like my father's death, for example. I was only 13 at the time, and I think I was young to process it, but I felt it was kind of, I don't know, not meaningless in a way, but it took me many years to kind of acknowledge it, process it. And I see my family members, and for them it's a whole big emotional event. How is meaning? Is that something we learn, or?
So let me borrow from Freud, Sigmund, the prophet of the late 19th, early 20th century. Your parents are the very first sources of meaning for you. Just in case there's a good amount of hurt, you run to them, they hold up your hand, they give you a kiss, give you a hug. That's where you find your Garden of Eden. Something happens at a certain age, maybe 11, maybe 12, where you go to them, you ask them some questions, or maybe you begin to see things slightly a bit more clearly. And you ask them questions, but this time you have intentions. You're really curious about sex. You're really curious about how you came about. And the idea of, well, you just dropped from the sky is no longer sufficient for you. And you want them to be a bit more honest. You have some intimations, you're looking for some clues, but you realize that they're either incapable of giving you an honest answer or they just don't know. And you realize at a very young age that your parents are no longer dependable, psychologically speaking, As you put your heroes on the cross, your parents, and they're not going to resurrect for a long, long time, you find yourself in school. Now you begin to have some of your teachers as your heroes, or maybe, actors and actresses. And then you begin to have friendships outside of your intimate community, i.e. family. And it's something that Abraham Maslow talked about. For those of you who may not know, he's an American psychologist in New York. And for those of you who value therapists quite a bit because you assume that they have a good amount of insights about things, and they do. Maslow was one of those fellows who was never really able to overcome his disgust for his mother. So even when his mom died, he didn't go to her funeral. He was just, I don't know how he felt about her, but it was quite negative. So there's a hierarchy in Maslow's philosophy of life. The first real meaning in your life is food. You're an infant. You scream, you cry. It's not because you want to know the nature of existence. It's not because you want to hold hands with God. You don't want to know why you're here, who brought you here by force. All you want is just food, And just in case health-wise you're suffering because your mom gave you gas, but she never tapped your back and you have some gas in your stomach. Now, it's not so much food you're crying about. You want someone to just beat you up so the gas can, come out of you, so you can kind of rest and be comfortable a little bit. Then, once the meaning for food and physical comfort is satisfied, you move into the next meaning or next phase in your life, which is, I want the love and support of my parents. I don't know if you've ever poured concrete. Go to Home Depot, buy a 60-pound bag of concrete, and then next to the shelf or the aisle somewhere, there is this powder color that you can actually mix with the concrete. And as you're mixing the concrete, put this powder in there, and all of a sudden you have this concrete that's no longer gray, but pink or blue or black. And so what your family gives you is this powder. As you're growing, love is being mixed in it. Trust is being mixed in it. Faith is being mixed in it. And so next time you cry, it's not so much for food. You fell, you scraped your knees, you want your mom to run towards you. That's the next meaning in your life, okay? And you want to know that there is stability. It's no longer physical, but psychological. The next meaning for your life is, I want to know that when I come home, my father is always going to be this way. My mom is always going to be this way. They're not going to scream at me, hit me, okay? Then there comes a point where you realize that, yes, you have had the food in your belly. Yes, you've had the food for your psychology and your emotions. Your parents have also given you some intellectual nourishment, but it's time for you to move on. Your parents like you, fine. You have friends, fine. But what you really want is to go into society, kind of like this class. You want to open your mouth and you want to talk. And you want to be respected by other people. You're no longer looking for validation or confirmation from your parents or closest people to you. You want strangers to respect you. Your meaning has changed. There was a time where you sat and your father would talk to you and you would be lasered. You would be glued to him. What is he saying? What does he mean by this? And then you would try to decode it. There came a point that changed for you. You didn't really care for your father's comments. What you want really now is your instructor, your boss, your friends, okay? There comes a point, let's say, it's what generally called the midlife crisis, but not really, where you say, you know what, I've had the food in my belly and that wasn't too bad. I've had the comfort of knowing that there is stability in my household. That wasn't too bad. I've had the love from my parents. Good. I have money. I have a wife. I have kids. But for some strange reason, I'm not satisfied completely, and I don't know why. What you have in all these different segments is that there is a death and a rebirth. A death and a rebirth. And in every death, you lose the meanings that you had created. But luckily for us, you walk yourself into a rebirth with all these meanings and answers coming to you from not too far away, okay? Let's say the metaphoric midlife crisis is the following. For whatever the reasons are, you no longer really care for the meaning that comes from food, that goes to your belly, or the psychological nourishment that comes from books, or the validation that comes from your wife or your kids or your boss. You're looking for something else. And this particular stage in your life, you're looking for a meaning that can be sensory experienced, if that makes any sense. And I forgot your question. What was the question?
Do we learn how to describe meaning to things, or?
Good morning. I don't know, maybe. Does that work for you? I have all these books in my house. I've spent the past 50 years of my life collecting books and reading them. They just sit there now. And once in a while, I hunger so much to go to the bookshelves, look for a book, look at the title and find it meaningful, and then open the book, read the introduction or maybe some paragraphs in the middle of the book and find that to be meaningful so I can sit for a few minutes and be inspired. I haven't found meaning in all the books I've had for the past 20 years. And the only reason I keep them are for my kids. I don't know at what stage in my life I lost meaning. I can't inject meaning in those books. I don't know why. There are some movies I watch over and over and over again. Matrix used to be one of them. Bourne Identity used to be another. Spy Game with Brad Pitt and Robert Redford, another. There comes a point, it's like you have, as Emerson would say, you have sucked the marrow out of something. Like you've sucked the marrow out of your marriage. You have sucked the marrow out of your relationship with anything. Whether it's a movie or a book or friendships, doesn't really matter. And once you suck the marrow out, it's like it just sits there lifeless. You know, it's kind of like if you've read the last 12 verses of the Gospel of Mark, where these 3 women go to find Jesus and bury him, and he looks at them and says, "Let the dead bury the dead." That there is something dead in people who are alive, breathing, but you can't find a human being in there who's creative, who's passionate, who cares for anything that's worth caring about, you know. And I can't really adequately answer your question as to how you can inject meaning into something that can no longer give you meaning. Okay. One of the recent interests of mine has been the life of Vincent van Gogh. And, you know, this is a depressed guy. He took up painting late in life. And for some strange reason, he's found meaning in the sunset, in flowers, in certain towns. And he couldn't find those meanings later in life. He couldn't find them earlier in life. I don't know how it happens. The more creative you are, the more inspired you are, the more you're able to inject meaning. And you better hope that the things in which you're injecting meaning is like this infinite well of creativity. And nothing contains that. The only reason why you and I worship the Buddha or Jesus Christ is we're not close to them. We don't really know who they are, what they are. There are lots of fantastic ideas about them, and those fantastic ideas have no bottom to them. You can spend the rest of your life wrestling with that Jesus really exists. And there are tons of stories out there, and one lifetime would not be sufficient, you know. But the smaller your life is, the shorter the life of that particular object and the meaning it gives you. You know, I come to school about 5 to write. There are these days, many days, where I sit to write and I can't find meaning in the things I write. And it's devastating. And that's something that death does as well. In other words, when you become very intimate with the reality and fact of death, what death does is like a black hole. It just takes all the meaning you had in life and just sucks it down. And you open your eyes, you look up, and there is nothing worth pursuing or desiring. Yeah. So if someone out there can give you meaning, follow them. It's good. Whether it's Snoop Dogg or Beyonce or Lil Wayne, doesn't really matter. Or Eminem. Anyone else before we I know you're Wolf. I don't know, sorry.
Spike?
Spike, yes.
How
Yes.
do you become content with that?
With what?
That?
Death? Well, you shouldn't. If you're healthy and if body and mind, you're relatively sound, you shouldn't think about death. Unless it's imposed upon you, like I'm your husband or I'm your wife and I die, and then all of a sudden you have to. So about 5 to 10,000 years ago, there was a story called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And for those of you in this class who once in a while find yourself in a very confusing psychological environment, my recommendation would be read the Epic of Gilgamesh. You have to know a little mythology, a little history, a little philosophy. You have to be reflective a little bit. But what you realize is that most of the things you guys are talking about, they're all talked about and thought about some 5 to 10,000 years ago. Epic of Gilgamesh. It's great. And if you send me an email, I'll send you a link to a YouTube audio. This guy narrates it, and he has such a beautiful voice. Okay. Now, one of the things that death does is that, let's say I am your husband and I die. Well, you're going to be saddened. You're going to come home, I'm not there. One of the things that death does is it pushes you outward. Amir is there no more. My life on the outside has no meaning. I come home, there is no one. I am lonely. I am this, I am that. It's all about the things on the outside. So all the questions that you begin to ask initially is, maybe I should go out there and buy plants. Maybe I should get a pet. Maybe I should go date. What sort of a tombstone should I get him? One that's like $50 or one that's $50,000? Okay. Now, still you're very lucky that my death has caused you to find purpose on the outside, going to Target, buying fabric to cloak my body and all of that. If you happen to be very, very, very unlucky, and most of us unfortunately are because that's the way our organism works, is that death pushes you inward, which is like Gilgamesh, you say, why am I here? If death makes everything meaningless, what is worth pursuing? I can't tell you how devastating those questions are. If you believe in God, you have 5 senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the touch, and the taste. They are gifts. You go out there, someone very attractive walks past by you. You're in the presence of beauty. You're walking, some woman gives $20 to a homeless person. You're in the presence of compassion. Someone slaps another and the other person says, I forgive you. These are wonderful things that your senses bring about. You read some passage from Jane Austen and you grow wings and you soar to the heavens. Beautiful. What death does is that it steals, it robs, it destroys, annihilates all the wonderful things that your senses can bring in. Add to it this other thing. You spend the majority of your life creating stories. And you can't create stories if you don't invest time. And you're not going to invest time if you don't care. And you're not going to care if you're not interested. And you're not interested if you're not attracted. So your entire life really is about going out there, experiencing, collecting stories, and then sewing them together. And then you say, this is who I am, and this is what I am, and that's what my life is. When death comes about, everything is stolen. Can I tell you a story? There is a man who enters this very, very strange town. It's late at night. He grows very tired. He takes off his clothes to sleep. That was his nature. And so he puts his clothes, next to him. He wakes up in the morning. His clothes were stolen. He runs to the court. He looks at the judge and says to him, someone from this town stole my clothes, and I demand to know who it was. And the judge looks at him and says, I don't think the person who stole your clothes was from this town. How do you know? Asks the man. Because when we steal things, we steal everything. And I see that you have your underwear on. And that's the problem with death. It steals everything. And you realize that emotionally you're naked, psychologically you're naked, intellectually you're naked. Because like a leech, you have to hang on to something, suck the marrow out of it. That's how you grow. But when you realize everything out there is meaningless because death awaits you and it can knock on your door at any time, then you say, well, what's worth pursuing? Death forces you to lose interest in things. And your question now is, well, how do you accept it? You're not going to accept it. You're going to fight. I mean, ask anyone who's diagnosed with cancer. They're not going to say, oh, I'm so great. That's wonderful. You know, unless you happen to be a Socrates or a Jesus Christ or a Malcolm X, you're not going to walk towards your death peacefully. And if you want to, like, accept death the way, say, Socrates did, well, Socrates came to a point where he didn't really care for his wife anymore. He didn't care for his kids anymore. He didn't care for his people anymore. He didn't care for conversation or thinking or philosophy. And he was offered a choice. We'll either kill you or you can just, go home and never talk about this stuff again. You can live. But your life will consist of going home, eating, drinking, watching some TV, dancing, and then dying. And he says, no, life without philosophy is not worth living. I'd rather just die. And that's exactly what he did. And I think you and I are profoundly lucky not to be in that particular genre of people, like a Malcolm or a Martin or a Jesus, because for them, there is nothing down here that's worth pursuing. If, again, you're healthy in body and mind, you should covet everything. You should like everything. You should pursue everything. But you should do it reflectively and philosophically, which is very close to like being dead. Because that's what philosophy does. If you do philosophy, maybe in the way that Socrates did, before you take a step towards anything, you have to ask yourself, why? Is it worth it? And if you do this rigorously enough, honestly enough, you may realize that there is nothing under the sun worth pursuing except the evolution, enhancement, refinement of your own intellect, your own soul. Acceptance only comes after depression, and you don't want to go there. And depression comes only after a good amount of wrestling that you have done to make things work, only to realize you're not capable and you don't have the tools. And then you fall apart. We should live. Terry? Anything? Olivia?
How do you stop being dependent?
I'm sorry?
How do you stop depending?
Well, it depends on what kind of people. You should be very dependent on your parents. Extremely. Even if they don't like it, be clever, be cunning, be smart. You're under a roof, no rent. They cook for you. They clean for you. They do your laundry. They save you from being lonely and pathetic. They tell you how wrong you're about certain things. They create conversation. Okay? Then you go to school, like this one here. You need me. You depend on me. You need an A. You need a 4.0 so you can go to Yale. And then you need the instructors over there, right? You also need to be good to your boss so he can give you a raise and not fire your ass. But you also need friends, because once in a while, the pressures of life are too much. You need to vent. So choose the right friendships. And then when you realize you have some creative talents about you, like you paint, you do music, you like to hike, you like to travel, if you have saved a lot of money, then you can travel on your own. You just need to depend on a good pilot and some passengers who are not so unruly. Independence means a good amount of privilege that comes with power. You're 18, you have zero power right now. You need to use people in the right way so that when you're 25 or maybe 30, then you can have power. Then you can say, I don't need you. Right now, you need to depend on an entire world to make your life going. Am I? Are we? Is it? I mean, you don't need to like your boyfriend or girlfriend. Just know that, without them, you'll be lonely and pathetic. Use them for another couple years until you graduate and move away. Be smart. Independence comes with power. You don't have any right now. I know I've used this example in this class or analogy. In Persian, there is this word via qayyam. You buy a tree, a small tree, you put a stick here, you put a stick there because the wind and the storm and the rain is going to uproot this 1 gallon tiny little tree. The tree would be stupid to say, give me independence, remove the sticks and the rope. But what are you going to do? You're going to die. Let me just hold you in hostage, for like the next 10, 15, 20 years. Once, the roots go down, once your trunk grows big and you become gigantic, then you'll demolish the sticks on your own. The rope will break on its own. You don't need to fight for all those things. Trust me. Depend on the right people. Are we? Good job. That's it? Anyone? With anything not worth talking about? Are you sick? Richard? Richard. Yes, Richard.
For the
Assignment.
Yep.
Yeah.
The weekly assignments that we do, I know I believe we're on week 5 right now.
Yeah.
I noticed in the module just only have those 3 videos.
Yeah.
Prodigal Son and the cave. Other one I can't remember. Is there going to be more videos?
Once the first assignment is over, then you'll have 3 new batches. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And any guidance on the assignment other than what's online?
Have a good time.
Okay.
Yeah, just, if you were to just focus the next 20 years of your life on Prodigal Son,
Cool.
yeah, it's a really, really, really good story. I think it's the Gospel of Luke, or maybe Matthew or Bob. Gospel of Bob. It's a recently discovered gospel in Oakland. Yeah, it's a great story. Okay, anyone else? Terry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me.
What? Oh, on the way you were laughing, I thought maybe. What is it? Guilt? So let me tell you a story. Are you a Christian? Jew? Buddhist? You're a Muslim. So, it's one of those fantastic stories that is layered with complications. It comes from Genesis. It's in the Old Testament. It's about the Garden of Eden. Hello. That you have these people, these two metaphoric characters, and everything has been created for them. Okay. The first entity, his name is Adam, which means dust or earth. The second entity is Eve, which means life. In other words, body and soul. Initially, it's only Adam that's created. Adam grows bored, and God sees that Adam is bored. God is pained by what he sees, puts him to sleep, and creates an Eve, a spirit. And now comes the conflict. Adam wants routine. Adam wants to only walk around the things that are familiar to him. Eve has a different plan. Eve doesn't enjoy fleshy, meaty things all the time. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship. Initially, he brings you roses, writes you poetry, and then it just dies. It becomes a famine. No poetry, no flowers. And then once in a while you say, what the hell is this? I want some excitement. I want some passion. Okay? That's the Eve part of you that says, this is not enough. I want a different kind of meaning to my relationship. Okay? And God tells them, do whatever. Go wherever. There's only one thing you shouldn't do. There is something over there. Don't go near that. Should you go, don't touch. Should you touch, don't pick. Should you pick, don't bite. Should you bite, don't chew. Should you chew, don't swallow. But here's the thing. The only reason they go to this other thing is because they're tempted. That's the first thing you need to understand about us human beings. We are tempted. We have no choice but to be tempted. There are things that are bigger and more beautiful than the things you have in your life. You thought you're a great writer? Read the dialogues of Plato. You thought that you think well? Read the biography of Malcolm X. It doesn't matter what you think yourself to be. You're always going to be tempted. Why? Because someone out there can do things much better than you. And you want to be like them. And in wanting to be like them, greed comes about. Now here's the thing. You're not going to feel guilty if you haven't gotten caught. You know, I've read the questions you submit for this class, and I know what you use to come up with those questions. It's not your brain. AI. Now here's the thing. What if I call you to the office and show you how you've plagiarized, how you've cheated? First, I have power that you don't. That power demands your respect. Your future is on the line. And I have caught you. You would have never felt guilty or ashamed if I would never push this into your face. So that's the first thing you need to understand. Someone creates certain boundaries, gives you do's and don'ts. You push the envelope, assuming that they are not going to be aware of this. But lo and behold, they are, and they catch you. Now, if a stranger catches you, you don't really care, it's a stranger. If it's someone very close to you who catches you, then you're going to say, I'm so sorry. Before guilt comes about, shame shows its face. So I guess guilt by itself is not an issue. What you should think about is who in your life created the wrongs and the rights, the goods and the bads? Who drew the lines? Who created those boundaries? If there is someone in your life who is noble, mature, reflective, they usually create good boundaries. And should you cross those lines, then if they catch you, they'll reprimand you. And that's a good guilt. It's baptism through fire, if you will. If on the other hand, you have stupid people in your life, don't give them the power to make you feel guilty.
What if I just feel like guilty regardless? Like it's not even about.
You need therapy. I'm just kidding, sorry. I'll tell you a story that comes to us from Franz Kafka about guilt. It's really quite a moving story. Let me season it in this way. When 9/11 happened, I changed my way of telling the story. When 9/11 happened, all of us Middle Easterners had to go to the immigration office and do fingerprinting so that they could figure out if our status here is legal or illegal. And all of us were looked upon as potential terrorists. I go in there, and 10 minutes later, I am cuffed. Now, under every immigration office, there is a basement. And those basements have lots of tiny little cells, like 5-star hotels. You go in there, they lock you up, and they give you free food. And all the while that I'm carried down, I'm asking why? 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 Is it my skin color? Is it my nationality? Is it this? Is it that? What Franz Kafka wants to suggest is the following. Everything about your life is good. You have nothing to really complain about. But you wake up from a nap and you feel like crap, and you ask why? Why am I here? Why is my life meaningless? And the suggestion, Rosalind, is the following. You are guilty simply because you're human. Life is going to give you meaning. Life is going to rob you of that meaning. It's not because you've done anything wrong. Your own psyche. You're good. Your life is beautiful. Then you go home, you say, maybe I should just put my head down and take a nap. And you wake up and you're in a foul mood. You turn on the TV, you turn it off. You turn on the radio, you turn it off. You go with your iPad to listen to some good music, but you turn it off. You walk and you feel aimless. It doesn't happen often, but it happens once in a while. You've committed no transgressions. You've done no wrong. You're just a human being who sometimes feel incompetent and irrelevant and insignificant. And life forces you to feel guilty for reasons unknown. It's really quite fucked up. Let me see if I can. Yes. Can I give you a poem? Poem. پدری با پسری گفت به قهر که تو آدم نشوی جان پدر حیف از این عمر که ای بی سر و پا در پی تربیتت کردم سر دل فرزند از این حرف شکست بی خبر از پدرش کرد سفر رنج بسیار کشید و پس از آن زندگی گشت به کامش چو شکر عاقبت شوکت و والایی یافت حاکم شهر شد و صاحب زر چند روزی بگذشت و پس از آن امر فرمود به احضار پدر پدرش آمد از راه دراز نزد حاکم شد و بشناخت پسر پسر از غایت خودبینی و کبر نظر انداخت به سر و پای پدر. گفتی که تو آدم نشوی، تو کنون شوکت جا هم بنگر. پیر خندید و سرش داد تکان. گفت این نکته برون شد از در. من نگفتم که تو حاکم نشوی، گفتم آدم نشوی جان پدر. Good job. If I was to translate very crudely for you, it would be the following. A son has committed no crime. He's done everything his father asked. The father looks at him and says, when are you going to become mature? What's wrong with you? The son says, I've done everything you've asked. Yes. All the time I invested raising you, caring for you, you're nothing but a piece of shit. And the son is broken-hearted, walks away, goes away, becomes a Donald Trump. Rich, the president, all sorts of things. He says, now I'm going to tell my father who I've become. Go fetch him, bring him to my kingdom. And so the father comes, he's like hunchback now, he's old, weak. And the son looks at him and says, do you see? I'm a king now. And the father looks at this son of his and says, I didn't say you won't be a king. I said you will never turn out to be a decent human being. And that's the problem with us in life. That there is something about us that says you can be more, you can do more. And it's never enough. I don't know why that is. It's both a blessing and a curse, and there's no escape from it. If there is a way out, death. But we'll talk about that later. Anyone else? What time is it? We have like 5 minutes. Let's have something like good. Yeah, Andy?
How do you deal overthinking? Sometimes, like, whatever I'm about to say, like, it's like my mind wanders.
Well, it depends what you're thinking about.
Like, life, like,
It depends what kind of life you're talking about, what aspect of life you're talking about.
it's like, how do I explain it? It's like, mind just like starting to like, oh, am I doing this well now? I don't know.
Look, I'm not thinking about my wife right now. Do you know why? I left the house in good terms. And we had a conversation this morning, it was about the kids. That was fine. But I'm going to do an experiment tonight when I go home. I'm going to pick a fight with her. I'm going to piss her off. And I'm sure in return she'll piss me off 1,000-fold. And then that anger, upsetness, disturbance will force me to think and overthink why I did all the things that I did and why I said all the things I said. I probably won't be able to sleep. I probably won't be able to eat. In the morning when I'm about to leave the house, I probably will be embarrassed, ashamed, feel guilty to even look at her. So I have to wake up extra early, like 3 in the morning, pack my stuff and quietly go out. So when you say you overthink about something, what you're basically saying, I may be wrong about all this, that something about the relationship has gone bad. If not bad, at least there are lots of gaps and holes in it. And they suck you in them and then force you to think. Because when you find yourself in a deep hole, what you have is darkness, confusion, dread, anxiety, irritation, frustration, anger. And these are not feelings that are pleasant for us, you know. And so you're looking for a rope or a ladder to get yourself out. And so you begin to think and overthink. And it happens to all of us in this class. If somehow some things about your life has been cracked open, the calm and the peace and the comfort leave you. And you want to bring them back. And overthinking in those areas are really good. The only problem is really, overthinking is not going to do anything for us, but it's just part of our natural instinct to kind of figure out how to bring the calm and the peace back. Patience and time, they have a tendency of ironing things out. Yeah. You know, you've been very quiet today. You're tired.
Not because I would love you. It's right before class, so I'm just thinking and processing. But you're right, when you go through those times, it makes you think, and what do I need to do to fix it, and how can I get better? It's always about self.
Anyone else? That's it? Yeah, we should.
Kind of a vague one, but any
Now you ask, I got 10, 15. Go ahead.
any recommendations for the father of a 13-month-old raising young children?
I have some clothes, I can bring them for you.
Yeah.
Do you want them?
No, thank you. We're
Oh.
good. We have a good hookup for that, but.
I can't share my perspective with you because it's not very pleasant.
Stuff I'm here for.
Fathers and mothers are two different animals. Fathers are usually on the outside, whereas the mothers are on the inside. They are one with the kid. Fathers are on the outside asking, why? What the hell? What is this? I want out. Hypothetically speaking, but not really. When you have children, so much of you and so much of your time and so much of your stories and so much of your hopes and dreams are taken away from you. And it's really, really difficult to cope. So for those of you in this class who have parents, especially fathers, and they happen to be not so involved in your life, you need to understand how enormously difficult it is to be a father. Not so much a mother, but to be a father, because you're really on the outside, especially if you have girls, because girls gravitate towards their father like when they're like 50. You know, they're usually just attached to their mom for the most part. Then there is the worries that you have that comes with having a child in a society such as this, especially if you don't have a support system. If your parents or grandparents are not around, if it's just you and your companion raising these kids, it's devastating. The recent, I think, numbers that came out from Washington was that about, it's either 48% or 63% of parents are under an enormous amount of stress because they don't know what to do with their kids, how to live in society, financially, all sorts of things. So it's a very stressful time. Just know that you're stuck for the next, luckily for you, you're American, in the sense that the moment your child turns 18, you say, get out. You know, if you happen to be Indian, African, Middle Easterner, you say, oh, I'm stuck for life. Or Asian. There's a book you may enjoy. It's called The Anxious Culture, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look at the title, and then, I'm sorry? The Anxious Generation. For those of you who have Audible, you can download that. It's just good to have as much information as you possibly can, because things are a little complicated these days. And it's good to read some Stoic philosophy, because the kids bring out the worst in you. And yeah, and it's good to become familiar with your own emotions, how they come up, and how you can tame them a little once in a while. Well, I don't want to hold you up. It's good to see all of you. I know the class was a little slow. That's what happens when you get old. So, hopefully Thursday. Okay. Take care. Thank you. It's good to see you. Terry, thank you for the coffee.